Donald Goines continues the gripping, gritty story of crime in the black ghetto begun in crime partners. They're all back for blood. Kenyatta, gang lord with an army of brothers to deal deadly with crooked cops and dope dealers. Benson and Ryan, a black and white detective team desperate in their fight to stop the black crime wave. It's doomsday when Kenyatta joins them in a war against a secret list of drug pushers. Greetings and welcome to Ralph Reads, brought to you by TURN, the United Ronin Networks. My name is Ralph Anthony Garcia, also known as R4. The legal, the loyal, the regal, the royal, Ronin Ralph, your master of ceremonies. I would like to take this moment to tell you folks thank you for joining me on Ralph Reads, and to please tell a friend to like, share, comment, and subscribe to TURN, the United Ronin Networks. We are Ronin. Today on Ralph Reads, I continue the AlCClark, the alternative pen name of Donald Goines' Kenyatta saga, with the continuation of the second book, Death List. Let the reading commence. Chapter 4. Inside the well-furnished 6-room apartment over the club were the people who had participated in the robbery. Kenyatta counted the money for the third time. Then, after removing $15,000, made 6 small piles of money. He gave each person who had been involved in the robbery $2,000. Nobody complained about the way he split it up. I, for one, he said earnestly, am damn glad that this shit is over with. Kenyatta glanced around the smiling faces. I guess just about everybody is happy, huh? Red tossed off a shot glass of whiskey before speaking. They had been drinking and toasting each other since early that morning. That ain't the half of it, he said, his voice sounding hard and cold. I hope that finished it up for good. I hate robberies of any kind. That's why it's a shame Billy and Jackie ain't still around. They love to knock over shit like that. Kenyatta studied him closely before speaking. You're 100% correct about that, Red. 'Cause that joint happened to be Billy's pet project. He been trying to talk me into knocking off that particular joint for damn near a year. As he spoke, Kenyatta noticed Betty weaving through the living room, clutching a drink in her hand. He was momentarily surprised to see her stagger. He never seen her drink enough to get loaded. She dropped into his lap, then rolled her beautiful eyes up at him. He noticed that they were bloodshot. He had a deep conviction that the past few weeks had put her under too much pressure. The only reason he sent her on the robbery was because he wanted her to do something that would take her mind off her Auntie Joy's death. There had been no way for him to foresee that the robbery would turn into a bloodbath. He squeezed her small waist tightly. Enjoying yourself, honey? He inquired in what she termed his passionate bedroom voice. Betty smiled up at him, her face lighting up and her pearly white teeth gleaming.
You better damn well believe it. I didn't know Johnny Walker Black could make you feel so good.
As Red stood up to go, he staggered. I believe I'll be getting on down the road, he said, picking up his money. I got a date with an angel. He attempted to sing, but Kenyatta cut him off. Why don't you leave some of your cash here, Red? You don't need all that money in the streets with you at one time. It seemed as if he might comply with Kenyatta's wishes as he stood there rocking back and forth. But the alcohol got the best of him. Hey, baby boy, why you come down on me like that? I ain't no kid, you know? I can well take care of myself, brother. This is the type of shit that blows everything up in a man's face, Kenyatta thought coldly as he watched the man reel. I could take care of myself, Red repeated. Then he reached inside his shirt and came out with a pistol. See, Ken, I ain't going in the goddamn street without some kind of help, brother. I wish a motherfucker would try and take something away from me. He waved the gun at the couple sitting in the chairs. Kenyatta gritted his teeth. He knew exactly what he was going to have to do. There was no sense in wasting his time trying to talk the man out of his drunken plans. Kenyatta knew from past experience that once Red started to drink, he was bullheaded and hard to reason with. Even trying to talk him out of the pistol would be a senseless effort. Kenyatta hated what he was about to do. He tried to make his mind a blank and stifle any thoughts because he knew he'd be arguing with himself. Who the hell was he to try to play God? The man had earned the money, so why not let him go out and spend it any way he wanted to? His answer to himself was that the man would probably end up shooting somebody. He would have to disarm him. Kenyatta raised up out of the chair and set Betty down on her feet. Come on, bro, he said friendly-like. I'll walk you to the front door. I got something I want to talk to you about anyway. Red grinned at him foolishly, then started to put the gun away. The punch came at him swiftly. It was short and explosive. If Red had been just a little bit more sober, he would have ducked it. As it was, he almost rolled away from it, revealing how well Kenyatta had trained his people. The blow caught Red on the jaw. He dropped and slowly crumpled on the floor, and slowly crumpled up on the floor, knocked completely out. I knew it, Charles said from where he sat. I couldn't believe you were going to let him go in the streets like that. I hated to do it, Kenyatta explained to the people watching, but we got too much to lose to allow him to run around in the streets drunk. If the police get him, no telling what he might say while under the influence of that shit. So it's better all the way around if he stays right here until he's sober. Kenyatta stopped, reached down, and removed the pistol from the drunken man's coat pocket.
That's a funky thing to do,
Betty said, as her whiskey began to talk for her.
Shit, what did Red do to deserve all that?
She glared around angrily.
I don't care if all the rest of these niggas are scared of you, Kenyatta, but I'm sure in the hell not.
She belched loudly. Shit, Kenyatta, Zeke said from where he sat on the couch nursing his small glass of wine. Looks like you might have another one to go.
Okay, yeah,
she snarled as she staggered around the table to get a better look at Zeke.
Why don't you kill crazy bastards, just kill me, huh? Wouldn't that be the easy way out for all of you? Hell, I know too much for you to let me go on living, don't I? So just shoot me. Shoot me right here in the top of the head,
she said, pointing out the spot. Her words had brought a snap of fear to most of the people in the room. They were too involved in the robbery to have someone come up with a loose lip. They glanced up at Kenyatta to see how he was taking his woman's words. This could turn into one hell of a dilemma if Kenyatta didn't get her mind right. He raised his hand, asking for silence. I know what most of you are thinking, but forget it. This is the first time any of you have ever seen her drunk, and I promise you, it will be the last, he said, not realizing that he was making a promise he would not be able to keep. Hey, brother, Robert called out. We know how it is, man. Just like you said, I ain't never seen Betty loaded before. I mean, never. Not even close, man. So I know it's just the drinks and the talking. He spoke with conviction because he really liked the tall black woman. Technically speaking, Eddie B began, loaded enough himself to start trying to talk proper, which he did whenever he reached a certain point in his drinking. I'd say we've all had a few too many, but that's why we started drinking, wasn't it? Weren't we supposed to be celebrating something or other? So what the fuck? Let's let our hair hang loose. It's exhilarating to be loaded around friends. He stopped and took a large drink from the paper cup in front of him, then continued, I'm ready to call the ladies up from downstairs myself. Let's party, dig? We're not here to merely exist, are we? He glared around at his friends, then spoke to Betty directly. I really sympathize with you, Betty. It's getting increasingly boring up here. He tried to turn his back, but only succeeded in knocking his cup of whiskey onto the thick brown carpet. The other men laughed, but as Kenyatta took Betty into his arms, she started a crying jag. At first she cried softly, then the sobs became louder and louder. He glanced around at the other men nervously, then reached down and picked her up and carried her to the bedroom. Once there, he covered her lips with hot kisses, holding her tight and slowly rubbing her back as if she was a nervous filly. And he could tell she was coming around and relaxing. Her lips grew softer under his. Her tongue came out to meet his until there was nothing but a strong passion between them. After undressing her with care, he took her. They made slow and tender love. Her cries of fear turned into cries of passion. Chapter 5. Captain Davidson stared over his horn-rimmed glasses at the two officers in front of him. The stout, graying officer realized that it wasn't their fault that none of the officers in homicide had cracked the case yet. At least these two men had come closer to getting an arrest than any of the others, but he still had to crack the whip over their heads just as he did with the rest of the men. God damn it, Ryan, Benson, what the hell are you two guys doing back there in your office? Playing with yourselves? He waited for a second, then continued in a bullish voice. I can expect nothing from these young college-ass kids I'm stuck with in this department but you two guys? Shit! The word came out in a roar. It could be heard out front where all the junior officers worked. Ryan shifted nervously on his feet. He couldn't stand being yelled at. It caused his nerves to work overtime like they were doing now. Benson only fought down the smile that threatened to come to his lips. He realized how nervous Ryan must be by the loud yelling of their boss. That was the reason Ryan couldn't stand the interviews. The yelling just upset him until he couldn't think straight. Davidson must have realized that he was overdoing it because he lowered his voice. Now, fellas, he began, trying another approach. Let's try and look at it from my side of the wagon, okay? The fucking commissioner is breathing down my neck. Cops literally getting killed at will, and now this? Two men with their girlfriends murdered in cold blood in broad daylight. Yet, nobody saw anything. It's unbelievable. I mean it. We're not back in the roaring 20s. These things just don't go on in our day and age without getting solved. So what's the problem? I don't want to hear about won't nobody talk. I gave you guys a free hand, allowing you to work when you wanted to. He raised his hand to cut off an excuse from Ryan. Yeah, I know. You boys were going to work on your own time. I appreciate the offer. But what did I do? I said, no siree. Not on your own time. Just punch in, and I'd see to it that you're paid for every fucking minute you put in down there. Didn't I? Before the men could reply, he continued, and his voice rose higher. Now you can't beat such a boss, can you? I put my fat ass out on a limb for you guys. And now they're trying to cut the fucking limb off while I'm out on it. But I promise you guys one thing. If they do cut it off on me, I'll make damn sure I fall on somebody's head before I hit the ground. Do I make myself clear? Both of the officers shook their heads in agreement, thankful that the interview was over and not really bothered by the threat. Before Davidson got rid of them, a hell of a lot of other officers would feel his heavy hand. They were the closest ones to the case. No other team of detectives was anywhere nearer to solving the murder spree than they were. Oh, Benson, Ryan, Davidson called out as the two men neared the door in their rush to get clear of the captain's office. The next time I send you guys two young detectives to take along, please take them. How the hell else are these guys going to get any experience if they don't go with some of you vets? That was my fault, Captain, Benson said quickly. The captain waved the excuse away. I didn't ask about whose fault it was. Just take them along next time. I don't see how they could get in the way by just riding in the back seat of your fucking police car. Okay, Captain, we'll take care of it, Benson replied as he opened the door. Ryan almost ran through the open door in his haste to get away from the captain. As they made their way through the office, Benson noticed the two young detectives sitting at the desk. Both men were grinning. As Benson caught their eyes, the men glanced away, but not before he could see the look of triumph. Up your fucking ass, Benson said under his breath. He promised himself that it would be a cold day in hell before he'd allow those bastards to follow him along on any case. Hey, Ryan, a slim, red-faced detective called out as they passed. You and Ben had better check and see if you still got anything back there to sit on. The other officer sitting nearby broke out laughing. It tickled them to see another man on the carpet, just as long as it wasn't their own asses catching the hell. To get called into the captain's office wasn't anything to be proud of. He very seldom wanted to see an officer unless it was about something important on a new case or about someone's mistake. Benson glared around defiantly at the white officers. It didn't take much for him to realize that they enjoyed what they thought was his being put into place. But a hell of a lot of people had been killed lately, and not only hadn't Ryan and Benson had any luck, but neither had any of the other detectives in the room. Let's take a quick ride, Ryan said briskly, not even waiting for his partner's answer. He kept walking until they got in the elevator, then pushed the button for the garage. Both men remained silent, trying to make some kind of sense of the latest murders. Ryan drove, taking the freeway until he reached the Clay Street exit. He took the ramp that led to the right and made a turn over to Oakland Avenue. He parked behind a moving van, then removed a small slip of paper from his pocket. Kenyatta, he said out loud. I don't know if he's got anything to do with this shit, but everything we've got leads in his direction. Benson nodded toward the storefront a few cars away. Well, that's the bastard's funky-ass club. It took a hell of a lot of trouble just to get somebody to have the nerve to tell us where it's located. Benson stated, then continued. That in itself speaks of the enormous ghetto power. Whenever people fear somebody, as it seems these people fear him, it's time we looked into it. Ryan nodded his head in agreement. I can understand how this guy exploded in our midst without us ever getting any kind of wire on him. It's as if he came from another world. Nobody wants to talk about him or his people. As the two detectives sat watching the front of the club, a small black Ford pulled up. The car was tilted over towards the driver's seat, and where the driver got out, it was easy to see why. A huge, fat, white man got out from the driver's side and waddled around the car, carrying a brown briefcase in his left hand. He glanced down at a piece of paper in his right hand, reading an address as he reached the sidewalk. The three black men loitering in front of the building stared at him coldly as he pushed past them. He was breathing hard as though he had just run 10 miles. I wonder who the hell he could be, Benson said quietly. Ryan lifted his shoulders in a shrug. He could be the neighborhood's friendly insurance man, you know? Even while he was talking, Ryan was writing down the license number of the late model car. As Benson watched his partner write down the number, he couldn't help but think how it would be if the fat white man had been black. His partner probably would have suggested they pull him over when he came out and shake him down. For spite, Benson started to make the suggestion himself. Why not, he thought coldly. What's good for a black man should be good for a white one too, but he knew better. If the white man turned out to be a working businessman going about his business of robbing the black neighborhood and they shook him down, all he had to do would be to call downtown and make a complaint about being illegally stopped and searched. Then there will be hell to pay. They would have to come up with some kind of an excuse for why they had detained the man and put him through so much trouble. Benson had to laugh sardonically as he thought about it. All those black men who were stopped daily and searched out on the streets for no other reason than they were black. The officers who stopped them believed all black men did something wrong, so they had a right to stop and frisk any black man they saw. But it was so different when it came to a white man. Oh, God, so much different, he moaned. What's wrong? Ryan inquired slowly, studying his partner closely. You got an idea or something? For just a minute, Benson debated with himself on whether or not to let his partner in on his private little joke. Finally, he stated, Oh man, do you really want to know? He then continued before Ryan could answer. I was thinking, Ryan, why go through the trouble of writing his number down, then having to check it downtown, when more than fucking likely it's a rented car and a phony name? To beat all that shit, why don't we just act like he's a black dude when he comes out and lean on him a little? You know what I mean, Ryan? We'd lean on enough niggas daily for it to be quite easy. Benson watched his partner's face. It went red. Then Ryan rubbed at his chin nervously, trying to make up his mind on how to answer Benson. Man, you're really in a hell of a mood today, huh? Ryan began, as he thought over the ticklish question Benson had dropped in his lap. He cursed silently at himself, wishing he had left well enough alone. Now, since he'd asked for it, Benson had really put it in his lap. All of the problems of what could happen flashed through his mind. The last thing he wanted was another meeting with the captain, not anytime soon anyway. If the fat salesman was to do any complaining, that's just what it would add up to. Another fucking meeting with the captain. There was something like a tacit agreement among the policemen about white businessmen. You don't harass them. You didn't harass them while they were down in the black neighborhoods. A white junkie was something else. He was nothing. But a taxpayer? That was a horse of another color. White color at that. Benson could read it all in his face. Don't worry, Ryan. I was just fooling with you, man. I don't want the trouble it could bring either. For a minute, Ryan couldn't look at his partner in the eye. You make me feel like a $3 bill, Ben. If you want to, we can shake him down. I was just thinking, though, if a kickback comes out of this shit, we'll have some tall explaining to do. The fucking captain will say, "Why are you guys hustling the white man? Everybody in the city knows it was a black gunman who made the hit, so where's the connection with the white merchant?" He didn't have to illustrate too much for Benson to know that his partner was right. I mean, Ben, it won't go as hard for me as it could go for you. All I'd have to say was that it was your idea and I just went along with it. Even though you know I wouldn't shift the blame on you, but I'm just trying to show you where we'd be. The first thing we'd have to answer is why. Why in the fuck did we bother him? Don't we have enough troublemakers down here to cope with without going out of our way to disturb working people? The very air in the car seemed to become oppressive to Benson. But what his partner said was true. They would never be able to make their superiors understand. Even as Benson thought about it, it seemed foolish. What would a well-dressed white man want with someone like Kenyatta except to sell him something that would be junk a month later? They lived in two different worlds. The world of men like Kenyatta was a black world, devoid of whites. Even as Benson thought about it, he remembered that the little he was able to dig up on Kenyatta showed him to be militant, preaching against associating with whites. As he went over the possibilities in his mind, Benson quickly came to the conclusion that the fat white man was probably just the landlord coming to collect his rent. He put his thoughts into words. You know, Ryan, I'm grabbing at straws, really. That guy's probably the landlord trying to collect his rent. Benson laughed dryly, then added, and that's more than likely one hell of a job right there, trying to get his rent out of a bunch of hustlers like them punks hanging out there. Yeah, he's got one hell of a job on his hands, if I know anything about young brothers. Ryan wasn't fooled by his partner's words. It had hurt Benson to make that small confession. Benson really wanted to shake down the white man. Now, Ben, don't go against your hunches. If you want to, just give the word, man, and we'll have that fat load of lard jacked up before God gets the news. You're a good man, Ryan, Benson said slowly. Yeah, you're a damn good one to work with. But now that I think about it, I believe I was wrong. I can't picture no reason for there to be any connection between them other than legal business. Kenyatta hates whites, so they couldn't have much other than business between them. Let's let it pass this time. We can still check out the license number with headquarters. Chapter 6. The black men shuffled reluctantly out of Kenyatta's private office. None of them wanted to leave until they found out what the fat white man wanted. It was the first time any of them had ever seen Kenyatta treat a white man with any kind of respect. When this one entered, Kenyatta had gotten up and walked across the carpeted floor to throw his arm around the fat man's shoulders as if they were old war buddies. After making the man as comfortable as possible, Kenyatta had started ushering the rest of the people out of the office until there wasn't anyone left but him and the white man. Well, Angelo, I hope you brought what I wanted. Angelo rubbed his hand across his huge stomach. He had been nervous at the sight of so many young, wild-looking black men. He knew they were followers of Kenyatta and that Kenyatta preached death to the white man. So far, though, all he'd received was the red carpet treatment. Before answering the question Kenyatta had put to him, he asked one of his own.
What about the paper? You know what I mean. That green stuff.
Angelo leaned across the desk on his elbows and tried to stare Kenyatta in the eye, but quickly changed his mind. Instead, he tried to cover up his error by playing the big shot.
I didn't generally come this far out of my way for no fucking body, Kenny,
he stated, glaring across the desk.
But you've been bugging me for this information for the past 6 months at least. So I come up with it for you, but I've got to have my bread.
Kenyatta stared coldly at the nervous white man. Suddenly he stood up from behind his desk. Listen, sucker. You come down here, and I try and treat you like a man. But that ain't good enough for you. You want us to kiss your fucking ass to show how much we appreciate your coming down here, as you say. But we ain't doing nothing of the kind. Honky, you came down here because you can't sell that information you got nowhere else in the world. Ain't nobody willing to pay the price I was going to pay for it. Angelo drew a deep breath, letting it out slowly, hoping the tightness he felt would disappear with it. He hadn't missed the past tense Kenyatta had used. The words seemed to stifle the very air in the room. He pulled at his collar, and his face became red as a beet. The glare coming from the ceiling lights seemed to move the walls inward, sealing him in. He could picture the army of people he was in debt to, marching arm in arm toward him, each one carrying a different kind of weapon.
Now wait just a minute, boy,
he began, and realized at once that he had blundered before he even began. That was the problem of trying to deal with these fucking spades. You couldn't open your mouth without stepping on the tender ego some kind of way. Kenyatta's voice was smooth and softly triumphant. Things have just changed a little, that's all, Angelo. We don't have to pay that wild price you were asking now because we already know half of the names ourselves. But Kenyatta waved to the man to remain silent. Since you did go through so much trouble, we decided to offer you $5,000 for your snitching. I mean, if you really look at it like you should, that's good money for an informer, whether he's white or black. Being called an informer didn't set too well with Angelo either. But what hurt worse than that was the thought that he couldn't collect the whole $10,000 he had to come to think of as his own. Yet, $5,000 was better than nothing. As far as he was concerned, the information he was passing on to these black guys was less than useless. He couldn't see what they could possibly do with it. Even if they turned it over to the police, it would be nothing new. The big wheels in the police department already knew who was responsible for the steady flow of dope into the city, yet they couldn't or wouldn't do anything about it. So what could some black hoods living in a ghetto to do? Angrily, he reached in his pocket and snatched out the envelope. "Here," he snarled as he tossed it across the desk, all the time hoping that the black man wouldn't change his mind again. He needed the $5,000 to live. Without it, he was a walking dead man. His mind was already working on how he could pay certain people half their money. When they saw him come up with some cash, they would know that he was trying, that he wasn't just attempting to shine them on. Yes, the $5,000 would be enough to hold back the strong-arm boys. Kenyatta stared at the envelope as if it were a snake. He hadn't appreciated the white man tossing it down on his desk instead of handing it to him like a man. For a second, he visualized himself choking the fat man to death. It was a picture that he enjoyed. How desperately the fat man would struggle. The image of the man's red face turning blue brought a smile to Kenyatta's lips. Angelo sat impatiently waiting for Kenyatta to make up his mind. Nervously, he lit up a fat cigar.
I mean, what the hell gives around here, Kenyatta? We ain't never had any kind of misunderstanding like this before. I bring you what you asked for, but you've changed the fucking price. How the hell will you feel if I should do the same thing to you the next time you put in a big order for guns, huh?
It didn't take a mind reader to see that he had hit on a vital organ. The steady supply of fresh, untraceable guns was indispensable. It was of the greatest importance that Kenyatta keep his gun connection. Angelo saw this and pushed home his point.
You and me, Kenyatta, we've been doing business for over 2 years now without ever having any trouble. Now all at once, here comes some bullshit. Okay, I accept the fact that 10 grand was too much money for the information you wanted. But don't rub my nose in shit, boy.
There was again that fucking term, boy. Kenyatta gritted his teeth before jumping up and stalking around the desk. Angelo, I'm going to tell you one time, man, and only once. The way you honkies have of calling us boy is too much. I'm one nigga who just can't stand it. Now, I know you probably don't mean a fucking thing by it, but it still rubs me to the quick to hear a peckerwood call me boy. So you done run out of chances. If you do it again, no matter how bad I might need your gun connect, I'll personally kick you in your fat ass until all the lard runs off it. All the while the tall black man spoke, he pointed his finger down into the white man's face. Angelo could only sit in the chair and stare up at him with his mouth open. He promised himself, though, if he got out of that office alive, it would be a cold day in hell before he'd ever come down near the ghetto and do business with the black bastards again. Oh yes, he continued to sell them guns. It made him feel good to know that he was supplying the guns they were killing each other with. In time, maybe they'd kill so many of their brothers that the white people could start getting back some parts of the cities because the way things stood, niggas had already taken over the major portions.
I didn't mean no harm, Kenyatta. It's just that I forget how to pronounce your name at times and boy comes out. But don't worry, I won't make that mistake again.
Kenyatta glared down at the man without smiling. I ain't worried about it at all, Kenyatta said. I've already warned you. The rest is up to you. He turned his back on the fat man and walked back around his desk. This time, he did pick up the envelope. He opened it quickly, glanced down at the names, then back up at Angelo. What kind of shit is this you're giving me, Angelo? You got the Kingfisher in charge of the dope on the west side, east side, north side, and south side of the city? In other words, you got a black man in charge of all the dope that goes into the ghettos. Angelo held up his hand, catching himself before he made the mistake of calling Kenyatta boy.
It's the goddamn truth. I was surprised as hell when I found it out. I didn't know a nigga had that much power.
He became tongue-tied as he suddenly realized the word he had used. But since no warning came, he continued.
It's the truth, though. Kingfisher has the whole ball of wax. There's not a white distributor in the whole fucking city who can put any dope in the ghettos without the okay of the Kingfisher.
Angelo's words rang in Kenyatta's ears.
That's the way that bastard has got it set up. No drugs are sold on the large levels unless he has something to do with it. There's no big outlet in the suburbs yet, so the big boys have to play to the Kingfisher's tune for now. They damn sure don't like it, but what can they do about it? There's not another colored guy around here as big as the Kingfisher. He don't allow it. If the big white boys try and set up another black guy, something always seems to happen to the guy. It's a short investment, so they have to do business with the Kingfisher.
The spectacle of watching the facial expressions of Kenyatta was enough to scare the shit out of some people. and Angelo was no exception. At first, Kenyatta had been defiant. Then, uncontrolled fury flashed across his features. Just a mention of the Kingfisher was enough to make Angelo wish he was somewhere else.
"Well," Angelo began, "I'd appreciate it if we closed our little business deal, because I've got to get uptown and check on a shipment of guns. You do still want that big order, don't you?"
It was clear he was trying desperately to change the subject. With difficulty, Kenyatta managed to bring his mind back to the business at hand. A blinding white rage had blotted out all his thoughts for a moment until the only thing he could think of was revenge. But the guns were of immediate concern to him. Without them, he couldn't begin to put into practice any of the far-reaching plans he had. It took a few seconds, but he managed to gain control of his anger. "Yeah, Angelo, I know where you're coming from. Just hold on to your shirt for a minute, man," he said as he reached inside his pocket and removed an envelope. He took his time and counted out the money on the desk. Angelo counted the money alongside him, not even attempting to keep the greed out of his eyes.
"Why don't you give me a partial payment down on the guns now, Ken? And tomorrow night, when you send your people over to pick them up, they won't have to have that much cash on them."
Angelo's eyes continued to follow the large roll of money still inside the envelope. Kenyatta laughed loudly. "Man, you must really need some bread bad, Angelo. Suppose I did what you asked me to do, then something happened during the pickup. I'll be out of my money, plus the guns. No, baby, ain't no way for it to go like that. I couldn't stand to lose on both ends. It would hurt me bad enough if the cops knocked off our pickup spot, but it would ruin me if I lost all my bankroll along with it." The tall, lean black man stood up from behind his desk, showing by his actions that the interview was over. He walked around the desk and took Angelo's arm, leading the white man toward the door. "To show you how much I'm concerned about you, Angelo, I'm even going to walk you out to your car, so that there won't be no chance of somebody knocking you off for the few bucks you just picked up. I don't want no shit out of you, you know what I mean? Like you calling me back in an hour, telling me some shit about somebody knocking you over. Well, baby, I'm gonna make damn sure that don't happen." The black man's deep laughter boomed out loudly as they went through the outer office. Neither man took notice of the black men standing around in the room. Near the front window, two Negro men stood peeping out. One of them yelled out to Kenyatta before he opened the front door. "Hey, baby, maybe you had better be cool. It's a couple of detectives parked down the street. They've been there ever since Fat Boy pulled up and parked. At first, we thought they might have been a couple of his boys, you know, trying to put a little protection on him. But we checked them out, and it's them two detectives from Homicide, the black and white cops that always work together." Kenyatta stopped with his hand on the door, undecided on which course to take. "You say they've been down here checking out the place, huh?" he asked, his mind racing. "Nah," the tall, angular black man called Jug replied. "Nah, I didn't say they were checking out our joint. I said they seemed to be checking out Fat Boy's car." As Jug talked, Angelo stared at the black man. He shook his head. They did all look alike. Only this one had hair. If he cut off his hair, he probably looked just like Kenyatta, Angelo reasoned quietly. It was true to a certain extent. Kenyatta and Jug were almost the same height. Both men had the same lean build, with wide shoulders tapering down to a small waist. Men built for power, speed, and explosive action.
"God damn it, Kenyatta. I told you, you should have come downtown and picked up that shit. Now I'm involved down here with the fucking police. It's been years, man, since I've had a run-in with a cop. Now I don't need this kind of shit, but what am I gonna do? I sure in the fuck can't sit here at your place all fucking day.
It was the man's tone of voice that rubbed him wrong. Now, even though the law was outside, Kenyatta wanted to get rid of the fat white man. He glanced over his shoulder, then snapped his fingers. "Betty!" he ordered, his voice full of wrath. The tall black woman came running across the room. "Honey, I want you to walk this honky out to his car. Put your arm around him, Give the impression that he just finished knocking off some black pussy. Cops are down the block, and we would like to fake them out, so make it look good, baby." She glanced up at him in surprise.
"Okay, honey. You know I want to do whatever you want me to."
It was clear to everybody looking that what Betty was doing was something Kenyatta sure in the hell didn't like. He had to turn his back when she took Angelo's arm and went out the door. Kenyatta stalked back to his office and slammed the door. He didn't want to be bothered by anyone. Kenyatta gritted his teeth so hard his jaw hurt. It was the first time he'd ever had to use his woman in such a way. He'd rather have had her kill Angelo than walk out pretending that the fat man was her lover. Betty led the fat man outside. She put her arm around his huge waist and held him close. She sniffed, then tried to hold her breath. There was an odor about the heavy man that was repugnant to her. It would have been farcical for her to pretend that she didn't smell him, because she couldn't hide her reaction. She pulled away from him quickly, even though she still kept her arm around his waist. But one glance at her face, where her nose turned up, would have been enough for anyone to see the dislike on it. As obvious as it was unnoticed by Angelo. He was too concerned with the police car parked down the street. He fumbled in his pockets until he found his car keys. Then he attempted to make a convivial social impression for the officers watching. He puckered up his ruddy pink lips and tried to kiss Betty, but she wasn't having any of it. She didn't even want the man to kiss her on the cheek. She broke away from his embrace.
"It don't take all that,"
she stated coldly as she backed away from him, still smiling and grinning. The smile never touched her cold black eyes. "Well, I'll be a son of a bitch," Benson growled harshly. "Here we fuck up half the morning waiting on this bastard, and all the time he's upstairs playing house with one of Kenyatta's whores." Ryan cursed loudly too. "It looks that way, don't it? He probably came to collect the rent and the broad gave him some cut for the rent money." The two detectives watched the fat man drive past them slowly. It seemed as if he was trying to remove some lipstick from his cheek with a hanky as he went past. "Well, what now?" Ryan asked quietly, deep in thought. Something was wrong, but for the moment he couldn't seem to put his finger on it. "I don't know," Benson replied. "Maybe it would be better if we went on in. I think I'll go home and have some sleep. We seem to be too close to something not to be getting any answers." Ryan shook his head. "It's right before us, Ben, but for some damn reason we can't see it. Maybe you're right. After some rest, maybe we'll be able to think better. Drop me off at my place, will you?" Benson nodded his head in agreement. "I'll pick you back up tonight, say around 10 o'clock. Neither man bothered to speak again until Benson pulled up on Carpenter Street and let his partner out. "We missed something, Ben," Ryan stated, shaking his head. "I don't know what the fuck it was, but I just got the feeling that something escaped us that shouldn't have." "Maybe," Benson replied. "After you sleep on it, it might come to you." He grinned, then put the car in gear and pulled away from the curb. Even as he drove, the same thought kept nagging him. Then it hit him like a ton of bricks. Kenyatta was a black militant. There was no way in the world he would allow one of his black women to try turning a trick with a honky. They just wouldn't do it. His group preached against the white man, so it had been all a fake out. Something to fool the two foolish cops sitting down the street. He slammed on his brakes and made a U-turn. It was too important to pass up. Ryan had the license number of the fat man's car and he needed it. It looked as if there wouldn't be much sleep that afternoon for either one of the detectives. This clue was too good to pass up, and the case was too hot to not follow up each and every fucking thing they got their hands on. When he pulled up in front of Ryan's house, he just blew the horn. In seconds, his partner came out of his freshly painted white house. Ryan must have sensed something, because he ran down the battleship gray-colored steps. When he reached the car, he didn't bother with just putting his head through the open window. He opened the door and got in. In a second, Benson explained why he had come back. As Benson talked, Ryan nodded his head up and down. "I knew it!" the man exploded. "It was there, right there before us! But neither one of us could put our finger on it at the time." "Well, quit wasting time. Let's get downtown. This fat bastard had better be clean, 'cause we're going to do a lot of checking up on his ass." Chapter 7. As Kenyatta stared at the death list in his hands, he could feel a thrill of exhilaration racing through his veins. Now they could do more than just merely exist. The $5,000 he had paid out for it was nothing. Money meant very little to him anyway. It was just a tool, something to use to gain the things he wanted for his people. Now they could begin to move against the dope pushers, the ones who supplied the city, not just the neighborhood pushers who sold dope to take care of their own drug habits. He glanced around the apartment. He had sent out the word and the people were arriving. Loud, raucous laughter came from the front where a group of people waited. It was time, and everybody could sense it. The members were in a happy, responsive mood. Kenyatta had sent out the word that they were to meet at the ranch, and everybody was moving to the country again. There was a cacophony of sound coming from the people in all the rooms. It was an atmosphere of social gaiety as everybody looked forward to the trip. Some cars had already left so that things would be ready when the main party arrived at the farm. Betty sat on the armrest of the overstuffed chair in the living room next to Kenyatta, smiling broadly at everybody. "Eddie B!" Kenyatta called out loudly. "Hey, Eddie B! I thought you took the station wagon around to Johnny's to get the starter fixed on it." "I did, baby, I did. But wasn't no reason for me to sit around here and wait for them to finish working on it. Johnny said he'd call as soon as he finished working on it and that Buick he's putting the muffler on. I told him we wanted both of them finished as soon as goddamn possible. So he said to give him 30 or 40 minutes and he'd have them together for us." Kenyatta replied by flashing Eddie B one of his most indulgent smiles. "My man," he said loudly. "That's what I dig about the brothers in his organization. Ain't no bullshit about them. All of you have been trained. You're together, ready to cope with the white man, while the other brothers out in them streets are still blinded by the white man's shit." As he talked, Kenyatta raised his voice into a lecturing tone. "Each and every one of you in this room right now has been trained until you're like a machine. Dangerous to those who try to handle you and handle you wrong." The people in the room fell silent, listening to their leader. What he said was the truth. Each and every one of them were trained killers. There was not a person inside the building who wouldn't kill a white or even a black person if Kenyatta ordered it. They were all assassins, trained in the art of death. Even the tall, attractive black woman who sat at his elbow could murder women or children if the need arose. Kenyatta had trained his small band of disciples so well that there was no feeling of guilt over an act of violence, no matter how brutal it might be. Whatever they did was justified as an application of justice, black justice. It was the only kind of justice that held any significant meaning to any of them. That white justice was a mockery could be seen openly every day in the courtrooms, used for the rich and forced on the poor. Red has gone to the farm, Kenyatta continued. Everybody was listening quietly to what he had to say. I sent him and his lady on out with another couple. They took most of the guns with them, so we won't have to worry about transporting our weapons. I'm not sure, but the police may have been watching the place. When I say I'm not sure, I mean I don't have any idea why they would bother to go through the trouble of watching us. We ain't doing nothing. His words brought laughter from his listeners. Slowly, like a well-trained actor, Kenyatta raised his hand for silence. I don't want to get into it real deep right now, but we got what we've been waiting for. I got the names of some of the biggest honkies in the fucking city. I'm talking about the motherfucking honkies who have been living out in Grosse Pointe while selling dope down in the center city. Of course they don't have to come down here and sell it themselves because they got a good head nigga who goes by the name of King Fisher. But once we knock King Fisher's ass off, they gonna have mighty big trouble finding another good nigga like him. There was a roar like the sea makes when it's beginning an angry storm. The storm was brewing right there in that small apartment. It had started to brew many years ago, before many of the dedicated young blacks were even born. Zeke, the tall, light brown complexioned man who had been in on the holdup with Red, spoke up. It's damn sure time, Ken, he stated, using the short nickname that only a few of Kenyatta's closest friends ever used. There was the sound of the rear doorbell ringing. Instantly, the people in the apartment became silent, each wondering who would be using the alley entrance. To get up the rear steps, a person had to come through the alley, then walk through a trash-littered garage which led into the small enclosure that was the backyard. After getting to the yard, they can only come up on the rear porch and ring the back doorbell. The stairway that led upstairs was enclosed, so that somebody had to go down the back steps to unlock the door. The people waited quietly to see who was coming up. Betty moved uneasily on her perch as the newcomer approached. As the man entered, everybody there recognized him. He was the kind of person who would be recognized in the crowd. His arrival caused a different kind of reaction in each person there, but the women reacted the most. Betty was not the only woman who moved back in fear. The man wore a long black coat that was wrapped around him like a cloak, covering a tall, very spare body. Beneath the rounded dome of a closely shaved skull, large black eyes peered from either side of a jutting beak-like nose. The mouth below was sunken, the lips puckered, and the chin had a sharp upward hook. With one dark brown hand, the man caressed the bony line of his jaw, staring coldly around at the people in the room. Under the probing of those lusterless black eyes, each person either waved at him feebly or glanced away as if they hadn't noticed his searching stare. The atmosphere in the room changed. It was as if something unclean, something foul with slime had crept amongst them. Kenyatta seemed as if he was the only person in the room who hadn't noticed the change. "What's happening, Creeper?" he asked as Creeper stopped in front of him. Betty quickly got up from her perch on the side of the chair and walked back towards the kitchen.
I think I'll get a drink. You want one, Daddy?
She asked over her shoulder. Nah, baby, I don't want anything, but Creeper might care for a drink. He glanced up at the man. As their gaze met, Kenyatta experienced a shrinking inner horror. This man was something he did not and could not understand. He was a man who was totally alien to his own world. The Creeper was one of the oldest members of his organization. He wasn't dedicated to any cause except Kenyatta, and only because Kenyatta saved his life. He had been shot and wounded by the police, trying to find a hiding place in an alley when Kenyatta had found him and taken him home, cared for his wound, then gave him a place to live. For that help, the tall black man called the Creeper had become like a shadow to Kenyatta.
Well, what would it be, Creeper?
Betty asked, not trying to hide the dislike in her voice. Did I ask for anything? Creeper replied, then turned his back on her as if she wasn't there. For some strange reason, out of all the people in Kenyatta's organization, Betty was the only one that Creeper really hated. Even he couldn't understand the intensity of his hatred for the woman. He blamed her for coming between him and Kenyatta, but it went deeper than that. He had never cared for another human being in his life. Then Kenyatta had come to his rescue. It was not just a help either. It was the way the other man treated him, like a man. Kenyatta didn't turn away from him in horror because of his looks. He'd been aware for years of his looks since he'd been a child. When kids had started calling him the Creeper because of the similarity of his features to those of the man who played the Creeper in the movies. In time, he'd come to accept it, not caring one way or another what they called him. He was a man who lived alone until he met Kenyatta. The man stood over Kenyatta until Kenyatta grew uneasy. Well, what is it, brother? You seem to have something on your mind, but you ain't saying nothing. For an answer, Creeper let his eyes roam over the other people in the room. You know me better than that to think I'd say anything in front of them, he replied, loud enough for everybody to hear. The first time one of these niggas gets uptight, they're gonna blow this whole fucking thing up in your face, Kenyatta. You just wait and see. Before Kenyatta could give an answer to that, Creeper let his coat slip open. I took care of that little thing you asked me to handle for you, he stated harshly, not bothering to rebutton his coat. For a minute, Kenyatta couldn't think. The man standing in front of him was covered with blood. What was the man talking about? Kenyatta asked himself. He remembered asking the man to check up on Kingfisher's right-hand man, but other than that, he couldn't remember asking him to take care of anything else. He couldn't remember asking him to take care of anything. Kenyatta rose from his chair in one smooth motion and beckoned with his head. Come on, he said, leading the way towards the bedroom. He wanted to get to the bottom of this, and the sooner, the better. Something had happened, and whatever it was, blood had spilled. Across town in his penthouse apartment, the Kingfisher moved around like a man struck down by an unknown force. The information that had just come to him was so shocking that he couldn't believe it. The Kingfisher was used to death, but not when it was an act of gross mutilation so close to home. As Kingfisher paced back and forth in his penthouse apartment, he kept murmuring to himself, too close, too fucking close, too close, too fucking close to home. If they can knock off my right-hand man. He shook his head, unnerved to his very roots by this murderous act. We have reached the end of this portion of the miniseries on Ralph Reads. I would like, or rather love, to thank you, queens and kings, fellow royalty, for stopping by. You may connect with me via Facebook. Send a friend request to Ralph Anthony Garcia. On Twitter and Instagram at RGMC2407. Send an email to RGMC2407@gmail.com, where if you would like to leave a donation, please use the Zelle app or PayPal.me/RGMC2407 or Cash App. My cash tag is RGMC2407. You may also connect with me on my other channel, the music channel, Ralph Garcia, Master of Ceremonies, and right here on TURN, the United Ronin Networks. We are Ronin. Fellow royalty, pick up a good book, read a good story, and set your good self free. I appreciate you and I love you like cooked food. I will see you folks on the continuation of this AlCClark miniseries on Ralph Reads. When your instincts scream at you, listen.